I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. This week, we examine the deepening crisis at City Hall as 4 deputy mayors resigned amid the corruption scandal that has enveloped Mayor Adams. Among those calling for the mayor's resignation is New York City Controller Brad Lander. He officially kicked off his mayoral campaign last month. He has his own strategy for the mayor's removal. Thanks for joining us, and tell us what that strategy is. There's a committee, an ad hoc committee that can be convened. Can you convene it? Suppose you convene it and no one else shows up.
Thank you, Sam. It's an honor to be on with you. Look, first, as you said, I've called on the mayor to resign, and I hope he will do that. He knows he can't be the servant of New Yorkers that the job requires. So I'd like to keep those 4 deputy mayors, because they're all consummate professionals, and have him step down. If he won't do that, then the 2 paths for possible removal, if he's unable to do the job, are the governor or the city council sets out a pathway that's 2 steps. First, there's what's called the Committee on Mayoral Inability, and it's got 5 people: the controller, the city council speaker, the longest-serving borough president, and then 2 people appointed by the mayor, the chief counsel for the city, the corporation council, and at least 1 deputy mayor. 4 out of those 5 people would have to agree together and sign a piece of paper that says, we believe the mayor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. That then would get submitted to the city council, and they would have 21 days to review it, and 2/3 of the city council would then have to vote that they agree that the mayor was unable. So it's an appropriately high bar. No one takes this lightly, but these are unprecedented times.
Unprecedented indeed. One, how do we define disability, which has never come up in a case like this? And 2, how does the committee work? Do you call the other members and say, I want you to sign this? Or
So the charter doesn't actually answer the second question. It says these 5 people would have to get together. It doesn't have a chair. Since one of the 5 is the chief lawyer for the city of New York, the corporation counsel, who in this case is Muriel Good-Trufant, she would have a strong role to play. So, and she's an appointee of the mayor's,
right.
but
Suppose
she's also a 15-year
to.
civil servant. Well, if 4 of the 5 members of that committee don't agree that the mayor is unable to discharge the powers and duties, then it doesn't move forward.
So a tough alternative.
Well, of course, these are high. I mean, they should be high bars. This is not a small thing. And look, what I said earlier this week was not we need to convene the committee. It was I wrote a letter to the mayor saying the resignation of 4 deputy mayors under these circumstances is very serious. What's your contingency plan for how to guarantee continuity of government service? These are the deputy mayors who supervise the fire department, Department of Homeless Services, NYCHA, the sanitation department. So that's what I actually did, was said to the mayor, give us a contingency plan for how you're going to run the city in the face of these resignations.
Which we haven't seen yet.
Which we have not seen. And if you can't do that, and we have to see how things goes. We have to see what the judge does. We have to see what the mayor does with this contingency planning. It could go in a direction that it's clear continuity of services are there. But if it goes in the other direction, if he does more things like earlier this week when he's quoting Hitler and ranting about the public advocate, it might get to a point where 4 of those 5 people would collectively agree he's unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office.
And of course, we're talking on Thursday and may well be overtaken by any number of events, as we've seen. But if Adams resigned, or if the governor removed him, what about him running in the primary anyway to get vindication from the voters if he wants to?
That would still be his right, of course. I think the voters are fed up and tired of corrupt, dishonest leadership, and that's not focused on the real problems people are facing. We've got a housing crisis. We've got a mental health crisis. People in our subways sleeping on the streets. New Yorkers want a mayor who's honest, who's effective, and who's delivering a safer, a more affordable, and a better run city. And that's not Eric Adams. I mean, that's why I'm running for mayor. But if he were to resign or be removed, he could still run, and he could choose the Democratic or the Republican primary. I think voters have had enough of this corrupt chaos show, but it would be his right, of course.
Within days or at most weeks, Andrew Cuomo is likely to run for mayor. Why would you make a better mayor than he? He, by most counts, was a pretty good governor.
Oh, I mean, I don't think New Yorkers want to replace one corrupt chaos agent with another. Let's remember, this is someone who resigned in disgrace in advance of likely being impeached.
Not corrupt.
Well, there's a lot of corruption around him. His chief staffer, Joe Percoco, resigned in a corruption scandal. He set up the Moreland Commission, and as soon as it started looking at him, he eliminated it. He was in court. He lost a court case this week trying to get rid of the state ethics agency because they're looking into his $5 million book deal written on taxpayer time. And then he, sent all those seniors to their deaths in nursing homes and then lied to their families and to Congress about it. So I just think between the sexual harassment, the COVID deaths, and then flip-flopping, starving the subway, we've got 1,000 inpatient psychiatric beds fewer because of his Medicaid cuts. And look, he hasn't lived in New York City in 25 years. This is not somebody, he's running, in my opinion, for a kind of revenge, not to solve the problems of affordability and safety and good government that New Yorkers deserve.
If you're elected, you have to deal with President Trump. How are you going to deal differently on matters of immigration, of withholding federal funds, which you turned up? How does that work? Why are you going to be any different?
Yeah, well,
you still have a president who's a big bully.
We do, but the federal funds are a great example. So last week, my office discovered that Elon Musk and Donald Trump's Doge and FEMA had reached into a Citibank account and taken $80 million of our money, funding that Congress had awarded us and that we had invoiced for. And I was the one, my office identified it, spoke up. The mayor hadn't said anything about it. And then I insisted that they go into court to get our money back, and I think we'll win. We've got a contract, and that's our funding. So that's a case where you've got to be willing to stand up and fight when New York is in the right. Congestion pricing, I believe, is like that, and here I credit the governor for making clear we don't have a king, we have the rule of law, the laws were followed, and whether you like congestion pricing, and I think it's a really good policy and helped make it happen, but even if you don't, we can't have like a monarchy. So it's stand up and fight, use the courts. And yes, the city has laws that say, okay, if someone has committed a serious or violent crime, then it's appropriate to cooperate with ICE on that person's deportation.
So that goes beyond what most other progressives are saying, which is a little bit knee-jerk, saying keep ICE out of it. You have no problem with ICE coming in cases of people who've been convicted.
Where someone has been convicted of a serious or violent offense, our laws provide for that cooperation, and I think it's appropriate. But where someone hasn't been convicted, and in most of the cases we're talking about, if ICE shows up at a school where kids are, if they show up at a shelter where people who are here seeking asylum and you got grandmothers and kids, or you gotta have it so that people feel comfortable going to the hospital or reporting a crime and going to the precinct. So that's why those laws are important, and I absolutely would stand up and defend them. And really that's the thing that's at issue in the mayor's quid pro quo bargain about his prosecution.
Very quickly, you said you would get back the 4 deputy mayors. You also mentioned you would keep Jessica Tisch as police commissioner.
So I think that Jesse Tisch is doing a very good job over the last 3 months. The prior commissioner was, left in a corruption scandal. We need accountable leadership that keeps our city safe, and I believe that she is providing it.
Brad Lander, the New York City Controller, and running for mayor. And coming up next, what are the governor's options? We're joined by New York Times political reporter Nicholas Fandos. Nicholas is discussing the challenges facing Governor Hochul in dealing with this unprecedented crisis surrounding Mayor Adams. Now, you wrote that the criminal indictment itself might be in jeopardy. We're waiting to see what the judge does as of Thursday afternoon. Why is the deal, if it is a deal with Donald Trump, making it tougher politically for the mayor?
Well, the mayor, I think we should just say, got exactly, or is on the precipice of getting exactly what he wants. legally. But he seems to have badly misjudged what the effect of that would be. Instead of letting him get an easier handle on the city and a clearer path to re-election, I think there's a real crisis of confidence in his leadership right now, because New Yorkers and fellow Democrats are wondering in a very real way, what did the mayor actually give up to get this deal?
No, the mayor
Prosecutors are
says
saying-
nothing. The mayor says he didn't give up. There was no quid pro quo. Why can't we believe it?
That's right, but the federal prosecutors who were handling the case, who were there, say, no, there was a deal, there was an explicit deal. And the way that the public documents here, that the motion itself to dismiss these charges is structured, it does create a kind of a problem for the mayor, whereby the Justice Department is saying, we can bring these charges back at any point, and the reason that we're getting rid of them is that we need to free this guy up to help us implement our immigration policy. If you put those two things together, it suggests if he doesn't, these charges could come back. So there's a very strong incentive for him to work with the president. And that, plus what the prosecutors are saying, who resigned in this case, is what's most alarming. I think the people who are now calling for him to resign, or for Governor Hochul to potentially remove him from office.
Nick, if there were another mayor, would that mayor be doing anything differently on immigration than what Adams has either done or likely to do?
Well, this is an interesting question, because Adams has always been a bit more conservative than some other Democrats on questions of immigration, law enforcement, et cetera. And so he says, I can prove to you there's no quid pro quo, because I would be doing these things anyway. Like, I'm not doing this because there's some threat hanging over my head. I'm doing it helping deport undocumented immigrants who are committing crimes and I believe pose a threat to New Yorkers, because that's what I think is the right thing to do.
And
now,
most people would probably agree with that if they had been convicted of crimes.
Right, so public opinion polls suggest that that position is widely shared. Now, other people in the position of mayor, perhaps Brad Lander, your previous guest, perhaps others might view that differently or take a different approach, or just be unwilling to sit at the table with the Trump administration at all. But I think, yeah, polls show that position that the mayor is staking out is popular.
The governor is really in a bind. Does she pressure Adams to resign? Does she try to remove him, which could involve a rather lengthy, complicated process? What does she do?
That's right. I think she doesn't quite know. She was holed up in her office in Manhattan this week, basically talking to civic and political leaders in the city, trying to figure out a path forward. There's no question she has the authority, the unique authority to remove him from office. But nobody in her position has ever done that before. FDR tried with a mayor back in the 1930s, but it's a pretty unprecedented process, and she knows it would be disruptive. She knows that it would appear to undermine the will of the voters, so I don't think she takes that option lightly.
And you can remove him, the governor can remove him for misconduct or malversation. What is malversation? It sounds like something that no one would want to do.
Right, I don't think so. No, the Constitution and the laws are quite murky on this and what the process would look like. They basically just say that the governor has to present the mayor with charges and then give him an opportunity to defend himself. She could decide what constitutes misconduct. She could decide what that process looks like. It puts actually that much more pressure on her to figure out, if I want to do this, well, what does it even look like? How does it not become a months-long spectacle that puts the city in a worse place than it is right now? So I think she's probably looking for solutions that could help her avoid that would be short of that, but could instill confidence in the residents of New York City that their city is being, carefully taken care of and watched. And if the mayor tries to do anything improper or untoward, somebody will step in and prevent that from happening.
Putting aside the public interest, which of course we shouldn't put aside, what's in it for Adams to resign?
Not a whole lot. As long as he is in office and running for re-election, his political future is potentially open. I'm sure there's a lot of pride at stake for him. He's a fighter. And frankly, there's an incentive for him to stay in to be able to continue to raise money and money that could potentially go towards his legal defense. He has massive legal bills at this point, and it's unclear how he's going to be able to pay them. To resign would give up all kinds of leverage as he tries to do that.
We'll know shortly, within days or weeks, whether Andrew Cuomo is going to run for mayor. What do you think?
I think right now, every sign that we have indicates that he will. I mean, he's very aggressively maneuvering behind the scenes now to start lining up a potential super PAC to back his campaign, lining up fundraisers that could be hosted as soon as a few weeks from now, looking at different messages, meeting with city leaders. He received a pretty high-profile endorsement this past weekend from Carl McCall.
Yes, you reported that, a big endorsement.
Yeah, who was once Andrew Cuomo's chief rival, and Cuomo's run against him in 2002 really upset the black community in New York. And so him coming out and saying, no, this is the guy we need to run against or replace the city's second black mayor is a big deal. And it sure looks circumstantially like that was very coordinated with Cuomo to kind of build a draft Andrew campaign.
Andrew comes with his own baggage, though.
Absolutely. I mean, it was not even 4 years ago that he resigned in scandal as governor of New York. After a decade, he was accused by multiple state employees of sexual harassment. He denied that. He also was under investigation for his handling of certain aspects of the COVID crisis. So, and has a trail, I should say, of burned bridges behind him from 20 years in public office. So it's not as if he doesn't have all his own issues to confront. But so far, polls suggest voters may be willing to give him another look.
Brad Lander comes up with another suggestion for dealing with Mayor Adams, and that's this inability committee. Is that a practical solution? Never been tried. Most people don't even know it's in the city charter.
Yeah, I think it's another sticky one, and maybe stickier even than the governor's authority. It's not clear what inability means. There's a lot of evidence to think that it means physical inability rather than some other issue. And the city council speaker, who I believe would be a member of that committee, has already thrown cold water on it and said, no. I see this as about physical disability or inability. We're not going down that path. That could change, but for now, it doesn't look like that effort is going to get very far.
So what happens? What's your vision?
Well, if I knew that, I should run for governor.
Yeah.
I think that my guess would be that the most likely scenario, given the proximity of the mayoral election, it's just a few months until the Democratic primary, the general election
in June,
fall, is that this mayor's not going to resign, the governor's not going to remove him. Maybe she will find another way to kind of oversee his administration, to instill confidence, to extract certain commitments from him, and will let him serve out his term. He probably is going to have a heck of a time trying to win re-election. It's hard to see it right now. And that will bring us up to the end of this year, and then we'll have a new mayor. Now, I say all that, but I got to add with humility, these last few weeks would have been very hard to predict, so who knows what's going to happen.
Indeed. Thank you, Nicholas Fandos, political reporter of the New York Times. And next we'll examine how the crisis compares to past scandals in the city's history. As the city grapples with the mayor's future, the historian Chris McNichol joins us to put the Adams controversy in perspective. Chris is the author of several books about New York mayors, To Be Mayor of New York, and most recently, Bloomberg, How America's Most Successful Mayor Would Govern as President. Chris, how does this crisis differ from the two cases in modern history, at least where mayors have resigned, Jimmy Walker and Bill O'Dwyer?
There's no comparison to Bill O'Dwyer's decision to resign. That particular decision has been miscast for 75 years now, and it really isn't relevant to this situation. Jimmy Walker's case...
Well, let's not leave that. You're getting Bill O'Dwyer off the hook here. Explain why.
Bill O'Dwyer should never have been on the hook. It was cast as a mayor who resigned because of a police scandal, and he was then named ambassador to Mexico in the opinion of some people in order to get out of the country so that he wouldn't be charged. And it's just not what happened. There was a police scandal going on. He did resign. That was a decision that he had made long before the scandal hit, and it was really unrelated. And I'm doing research now, and when a book that I'm working on about New York City between 1945 and 1965 comes out, I'll lay out the details, and I think people will understand.
Was he a good mayor?
In many ways, he was a good mayor. He made a very bad mistake when he chose to run for re-election in 1949 because he was very sick. He'd suffered heart attacks. He had a thyroid condition that was causing him to make erratic decisions. He had hepatitis. He really never should have run in 1949, which he himself acknowledged years later.
Jimmy Walker, the early 1930s, Governor Roosevelt stuck with a tough decision. Does he protect Tammany Hall and the mayor, or does he try and get the presidential nomination and not look like a tool of the bosses?
Well, he made a clear decision. He brought charges against Jimmy Walker, or I should say that the special prosecutor in the case, Judge Seabury, filed charges with the governor, and the governor did what the Constitution of New York State requires him to do. He held hearings, and I do believe that he was on the verge of asking Jimmy Walker to step down, of removing him from office. He was able to work with party leaders, Al Smith in particular, to convince Jimmy Walker that for the good of the party, he had to resign. And that's the closest analogy we have to where Eric Adams is now. My own view is he's lost the ability to govern. He's had...
That Adams has.
Adams has lost the ability to govern. He's lost the confidence of 4 key deputy mayors who were responsible for day-to-day management of much of city government. And if he can't maintain the confidence of the people it takes to run city government, then he can't govern. The Speaker of the City Council has called on him to resign. The Senate Majority Leader has called on him to resign. These are his partners in government. And if he can't hold the confidence of those people, then he won't be able to govern the city effectively. That's one compelling reason. There's a second one, Sam, which is that everybody who's paying attention believes that Eric Adams cut a deal with Donald Trump. He denies it. I think very few people who are paying attention and who have an open mind believe that. This is very serious. We have in Donald Trump a man who has all but said that he would like to abolish a 235-year tradition of this country where we believe in a government of laws, not a government of people, not a government of men, but a government of laws. And the deal that he cut with Eric Adams is a matter of personal preference for the president. It's a matter of political convenience for him. And that's not the right way for a president to be making decisions. So I think that the protection that we need is to have the governors stand up to Donald Trump and not allow him to bully his way into abolishing what has been a very important 235-year tradition for the United States of America. Governor Hochul has the authority to remove Eric Adams from mayor, and she therefore has the responsibility. If she can convince him with others to step down, that would be preferable. It's cleaner, it's faster. But if not, she has a constitutional obligation to hold hearings and remove him for cause.
Apart from congestion pricing, which goes into a whole case of states' rights, something the Republicans in Washington usually scream about, removing Eric Adams, what would any other mayor do about immigration? If this is a cudgel that the Trump administration is holding over him, what is he doing or will he do differently than somebody who might replace him?
It's not what he did, it's the way he did it. He has been mayor for years. He could have made decisions to have the immigrants who have committed violent crimes who are at Rikers Island identified for deportation. That was an option open to him for years. He didn't do it until he went down and cut a deal with President Trump. That shows that he's no longer making decisions out of the interests of the people of the city. He's making decisions based on his legal jeopardy. And we can't allow that. The perception of that is very bad for the city. And again, the governor has a responsibility to act. That's the key issue with respect to the deal he cut with Donald Trump. And one more thing on that. He appeared, Eric Adams appeared on a Fox News program with the Secretary of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And at that session, the man said, you have to keep your agreement. If not, very vulgar manner, he said, I'll be in New York and up your butt. Mm-hmm. For the mayor of New York City to allow a federal secretary to talk to him that way, a federal cabinet officer, is outrageous. And he didn't respond at the time, and he hasn't responded since. So that's the sort of thing that people of New York, I think, are going to look at and say, this man no longer has the credibility to be our mayor.
Chris, Mayor Walker got Roosevelt off the hook. He did resign at the last minute. How guilty was he?
Oh, I think there was substantial evidence that he took something like $750,000 of money that didn't belong to him. And
corruptly? Was there a quid pro quo?
It appears to be the case. It appears to be the case. He denied it. He called the The $750,000 that was in accounts of his that could not possibly have come from the sources of income people knew about legitimately, he called them beneficences that friends of his who happened to be looking for city contracts would give to him because they were good friends. And again, it was sort of a ruse. And at the same time, that particular set of circumstances came at the end of a long series of corrupt actions by people around Jimmy Walker who we either had appointed or who were political allies of his. Very similar to the case with Eric Adams, where there were any number of people very close to Mayor Adams who have resigned, not in the most recent group that resigned, but before that, people who resigned because they were under investigation for corruption. So that's
And
where there's
because
a
the governor
similarity.
pressured him to get rid of them.
That's correct. And she was right to do that. She now has another job, and I hope that she'll do the right thing.
If she does, as you say, the right thing and tries to remove him, that's a messy process, isn't it?
It is, and sometimes democracy is messy. But again, I point out that she has constitutional authority. That gives her the constitutional responsibility.
Wouldn't that take almost as long as waiting until the primary in June?
It might, but it would cause everybody to pretend to look the other way, to not respond to the fact that the mayor has lost the capacity to govern. He's lost the confidence of his senior team. He's lost the confidence of his partners in government. That should not be allowed to continue.
What about the political implications for the governor? She runs a risk among the mayor's supporters, of course.
I think she runs a risk either way. If she moves forward, sure, there are some supporters of Eric Adams who will be displeased. If she doesn't move forward, I think there are a lot of New Yorkers who will feel that she has not fulfilled her constitutional duty to look after all of the people in the state, including the people of New York City.
And does this fall within the definition of misconduct on the state level?
Oh, I'm sure it would have to.
No doubt.
No doubt. It's not something that's laid out in the Constitution, what the causes are, but a mayor who would cut a deal with the president and now be responding to issues on the basis of his legal standing, that's not acceptable.
Chris McNichol, the historian, thanks for joining us. We look forward to your next book. And that's it for this edition of Close Up for the New York Times and CUNY TV. I'm Sam Roberts. Don't forget to download the CUNY TV app. You can catch our weekly program on the go, anytime, anywhere.